We're live.
All right. What embargo? We are live, ladies and gentlemen. We're live. Sorry about the delay. We're having issues in my video qualities. Shit, so I might just turn my camera off and speak. That might make things better for everybody. Um, but yeah, man, we got a special guest, Coop, Cigar Coop. Coop, welcome, man.
Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate the opportunity.
Glad you're here, and we wanted you to come on because you were gosh, is that how my audio sounds? It sounds terrible. Um, Wanted you to come on the show because you were just come back from Cuba.
Yes, kind of had an opportunity to go this year. Wasn't something that was originally planned, but got my opportunity to go down to Cuba. Yes.
So, Coop, tell us about who you went down there with, and what the how you went about signing up, or how a typical person that is interested in going will sign up in the way that you went.
Okay. Um, I went, and I guess I went with a group out of Atlanta who run a radio show called the Smooth Drawers Radio Show in Atlanta. And I've developed kind of a friendship with these guys. I've done their show a few times. I've gotten to know them. Um, Recently this year they brought in a new co-host by the name of Nick Cirrus. A lot of people may know Nick from his company LH Premium Cigars, and Nick's actually joined the show. But one thing I really respect about what he's done is he does not use that show to promote his brand at all. So he strictly is promoting, the cigar industry as a whole. Now, LH Cigars, though, one thing that is important is that LH Cigars, while they distribute in the U.S., making their cigars in Costa Rica, they also sell cigars in the Middle East, and that's actually how they got started. And those cigars are made in Cuba. So Nick, over the years, producing these cigars from the Middle East out of Cuba, has gotten to really go there many, many times, and he's really developed himself into, I would say, an insider inside of Cuba. So when he joined the Smooth Drawers radio show, it was him and the other co-hosts got together, and they came up with the idea of doing these tours down to Cuba. Um, Knowing Nick and knowing his inside connections and just knowing the Smooth Drawers guys are very well organized, it was a unique opportunity for me to go to Cuba, and I decided to go.
Nice. So, how many days were you there? Which days did you go?
So I stayed there. I left on a Sunday out of Miami, and it was what I liked about it was 5 days, 4 nights. Which most of these cigar tours, when you go down to Nicaragua or the DR, they're 4 days, 3 nights, and I think that's a little too short. I really think all these tours should be 5 days, 4 nights, because you get 3 full days in the country. The first day is kind of like a half day, and the last day is
Yeah.
kind of a
You
one.
always, yeah, they're always too short.
And I look at, hey, there's costs involved. This was not a free trip. And when I look at the airfare to days ratio, I felt like I got my money's worth with these guys. I should point out, too, that this was a tour where basically all I had to do was give them a copy of my passport, and they took care of everything else from the charter flight to Cuba, because there was not commercial flights when I went. The commercial flights just opened up today, to getting all the visas and everything. So I didn't have to worry about any of that paperwork, which is a big thing if you're going to go to Cuba. Is you could go to Cuba, but you got to file all the right paperwork, and that's a challenge.
Hmm. So you basically, went with like uh, for all intents and purposes, a real estate, a travel, sorry, not real estate, a travel agency.
Well,
It's almost like a mission trip in some ways.
it was
Gig.
really the way it worked was these guys are think of the Smooth Drawers guys is they're now doing they've hosted trips before. It's not the first time they've hosted a trip. They did a trip to Nicaragua earlier this year. They added the Cuba piece through Nick. Now Nick Cirrus is the guy on the ground in Cuba. He's got a lot of connections in terms of lodging, in terms of restaurants, in terms of the La Casa del Habanos, in terms of transportation, in terms of going out to the farms, which we did. So Nick was able to work things on the Cuba end, and he's kind of assembled a network down there, and he kind of manages that network on the ground in Cuba when he gets down there.
I see. So within what Smooth Draws does, I know that, for instance, I don't know if she's still doing this, but I want to say that, for instance, Cigar Vixen is doing a Cuba kind of like what Smooth Draw does. Do you know how that differs, or is it the same thing of all the farms you go to and all that, or?
That I don't know. I'm not as familiar with Vixen's trip, and I wasn't 100% sure if Vixen's trip was open to the public or she just went. That
Oh,
I wasn't.
okay. I thought she was
Yeah,
sponsored for some reason. I may be wrong, so
yeah.
okay.
Um, what I will say, what Smooth Drawers did as opposed to some of the other trips, and I'll take Colin Ganley's trip separate because I think Smooth Drawers had a cigar focus with the trip. It was an educational trip. Part of your educational visa, it's going to be cultural, but there was a cigar emphasis on that. Most of the cigar tours I've seen don't have the cigar emphasis. It's like a half a day. Collins was probably the one exception from what I've seen of the trip, which has a cigar focus.
Gotcha.
That's the one I'm a little familiar with.
Okay. So how many people went on this trip with you?
There was, I want to say, I think we had 11 or 12.
Oh, so decent sized trip, but small enough to get to know folks.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I would say the group size was perfect with this particular group. I think they sold out of the spots for this trip, and I think they capped it at the right amount, which was like the 11 or 12 mark.
Oh, okay. Oh, nice. That's good how they do that then.
Yeah.
And
Um,
you guys stayed, and you didn't stay in hotels though, Coop. You guys stayed in like in villas and houses, correct?
Yeah. So the idea was, we got down there, and Nick had arranged for us to stay in two villas in the Miramar district of Havana, which is a real artsy section. It's probably one of the more affluent sections of there. And basically, the plan was everyone would have their own bed. They were all single bedrooms. And the plan was to have two adjacent villas. Now, this is where it's really important to have a guy like Nick on the ground there. We get down there, and Nick finds out that one of those two villas had they sold it. They sold it out from under him. And that's just how the way they work in Cuba. They have no regard for like a contract or anything like that. And it's happened over and over again with a lot of things in Cuba. So
huh.
they sold out of that. But Nick was able to kind of insulate everyone from that, and he managed to get alternate accommodations. Um, it turned out that three of us went to more towards Central Habano, up by the Malecon, and Nick, me, and Gary from Smooth Drawers, we stayed together in a high rise, probably about 3 miles away. Um, so that, again, having Nick there with the experience on the ground, it worked out well. Had we not had someone who can do that, it could have been a real problem.
So remind me. So I know there's Nick that's behind the LH cigars. When you say Colin,
Yeah.
I didn't catch you. Who was Colin exactly?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I remember you saying someone named Colin that was on.
Oh, Colin Ganley runs another
Oh,
trip.
Ganley of Twin Engine, yeah.
Yeah, Twin Engine. He runs another cigar.
Oh, that Colin. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, he ran the
Yeah,
trip.
he did one there. His is a little bit different
Yeah,
than
So
yeah. His was different. His was the one that the Dave Garofalo Skip Martin trip was a part of
okay,
last year. Um, I can't remember the exact costs, but I'll say the Smooth Drawers trip was much more cost effective.
I see.
And I was very happy with what I got. This was a very cost effective trip, um, which I think was, and I think a lot of it has to do with the airfares going down to Cuba right now. But the big thing with this package is your airfare from Miami to Havana was included, and you only had to get the only additional cost you had was to get to Miami.
Oh, that's easy then.
Yeah.
Huh. Nice. So in terms of cost, I mean, I assume it's on the website somewhere. Do you have
Yeah.
any idea of how much it is for the one you did?
I want to ballpark it around 2,400. yeah, they may have to make some adjustments to the cost for the next trip, but I think it was around 2,400.
So that's all inclusive, excluding, of course, the flight to Miami.
Excluding the flight to Miami, what they gave us is it gave us a drink at every meal, as well as a cigar at every store,
Hmm,
and some level of gratuities. There were a few gratuities they did hit us up for, but again, I didn't feel like I felt like I got my money's worth from spending that.
nice.
You know, they even did little things
So
for us.
you,
Like we had expedited check-in in Miami to Cuba because it was a charter flight, so we didn't have to wait online.
Oh,
Literally, they literally called us up as a group, and we all just kind of you know checked in together at that point. So there were little things like that, which was great. You didn't have to wait online for 2 or 3 hours. So those are things again that Nick learns of certain services that existed at Miami Airport that he was able to incorporate into the trip.
okay, nice. So, I mean, and for those of you that wants to, get a visual trip of what Coop's been doing, Coop, I know that you've been posting a ton of pictures on Facebook, right, on your account?
Yeah, I put the Facebook pictures on my account. There's a couple of pieces that we have a couple of Stogie Geeks dedicated pieces already.
Okay,
One is on Stogie Geek Shorts called How to Go to Cuba, and the other one is we called it Debonair Cuba, which I kind of recapped the trip a little to some extent. Um, and then on Cigar Coop, I just put up an article. The article is called "In My Mind's Eye," and it's my impressions of Havana.
okay,
It's not a trip report saying I woke up and had a hearty breakfast and had a lot of fun and drank kind of thing. It's, okay, this is what I saw in Havana that surprised me and didn't surprise me.
sure.
Yeah.
So, uh,
what surprised you? The big things.
Um, so I think the big surprise down there was literally the fact yeah, the fact that I didn't expect I didn't expect it to be they were very welcoming to Americans. And I guess I was not expecting that. I didn't expect it to be anti-American, but they were really really happy to see us there.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing on there. Um, the Donald Trump protester did not surprise me. Uh,
well,
so the
yeah,
one protest I saw in Old there was one protest I saw down there. It was a guy standing in one of the squares in Old Havana, and he's shouting out "Anti-Donald Trump, anti-Donald Trump, anti-Donald Trump," and there are police there, and they're not doing anything about it. So, and what I came to learn down there is there's some real concerns, obviously, about Trump's policies towards not only Latin America, but what it will mean for the embargo. Because they feel like Obama has put this olive branch out there with the embargo, and something that it goes back to the surprising thing. It's something they really want. They really want to start interacting with the U.S. again.
hmm,
Now, from a cigar standpoint,
I mean,
uh,
I don't blame them.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean yeah, and I'm not trying to get political here, but that's just the reality. That's just the reality of what it is. You know, the the thing is that I don't want to say it's still a communist country, it's a totalitarian state, but there's little things down there that are happening right now. Raul Castro's a little more he's been a little more open on certain things than his brother is in terms of some private business, in terms of people wanting to leave the country. So, I got the impression that this was not a I didn't find anyone who was unhappy down there. And that was a surprise too. I expected to find this
Yeah.
very dreary country. And no, I found a very positive country. People happy. They were very proud of what, they did. I'm not saying they loved the government. They didn't. I'm sure they don't. But everyone was politically correct, is what I'll say.
sure. Seth, anything on your end? So,
It's no, I mean, I was surprised. It'll be interesting, Coop, and you'd be one to say it is, you go back to the country, um, post-communism. Let's say there's democracy, and then see what people have to say and see how public people are. Um, I imagine that there will be more people when that time comes that are unhappy. I mean, I went to post-Soviet Union Eastern Europe in the 90s, and man, they didn't say anything positive about Russia. So um, it'll be interesting. You've been to Nicaragua, you've been to Honduras. Um, how would you, I don't want to say rate the Cuba towards those two countries?
No, but in terms of how would I compare it?
Well, yeah, or how would you, people always, I think Zach said yearly for in Cuba than he does in Nicaragua and Honduras. You've been to Esteli. How does the country, what's the vibe of the country compared with that of like Nicaragua and that of Honduras?
Of the three countries I've been to, um, Havana is where I felt the most safe. And that's not to say I felt unsafe in Nicaragua. Honduras is a couple of areas I was maybe there was I think I was insulated from more in Honduras, but it was definitely a safe country. Um, it's they say that Cuba is not as poor a country. When you kind of look when they rate these countries on the poverty level, but I really saw a city that was a lot of people lived poor, and I don't know if that's just a product of the society they're in. Um, as opposed, there's still a lot of poverty in Nicaragua, but it's more when you get out of Managua, it's very agricultural, and it's the same thing when you get out of Havana, it becomes very agricultural. Um, the difference is when I got out of Havana into the farm areas versus getting out of Managua into the farm areas, it was a lot. It looked a lot like you were back to the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah,
So for example, I'd see out on the when you go out to Nicaragua, I'd still see cell phone type things, cell phone type outlets, even in some of these farm areas. When you get outside of Havana, you're not going to see that as much.
yeah. It's gonna become more rural and more
Yeah. And then
more
the big
third
difference,
world.
yeah, the big difference too is Central America is much more mountainous. Cuba is much more of a flatland.
Yeah. Now you also went to Pinar del Rio.
Yeah.
Are you guys hearing me all right, or am I just a pain in the ass on this
Oh,
call?
you sound
Oh,
fine.
good, dude.
Okay, cool. And what day did you go to Pinar del Rio, and what was it like getting down to there? Because I mean, it's the tobacco growing region of Cuba.
Yeah. So we went on day three, which was the middle day, um, to Pinar del Rio. Now, when we were down in Cuba, they arranged for us to have taxis in the classic cars throughout the week. And then one day they even arranged for us to have convertibles as a treat.
Nice.
But when we went to Pinar del Rio, we took a bus. Now, I was expecting, how can I put it, when we took the bus, I was pretty much prepared for a school bus or a school van. I don't know if you've seen the buses in Nicaragua and Honduras, or if you were in Nicaragua, but if you remember some of those buses, that's what I was expecting. We had a motor
Oh
coach,
yeah,
like a
yeah,
really nice motor coach, um, which was very, very comfortable. And so that, because that was just taking the cars out there would have been too difficult. It's about a 2.5 hour ride. Uh, it's southwest of Havana into the Rio region, and so that was like that took up most of that day three. We went to the farm of Hector Luis Prieto, who I know you guys are familiar with. For folks who aren't familiar with him, he is what I would say he's the rising star in Cuban agriculture right now. He's a younger guy. I'd say he's about 40, and he got Habanos Man of the Year in 2008. And that's just I'll just say this. I've been on farm tours before, and I've been on very good farm tours before. This was a clinic of a farm tour, is what I'll just say. It was fantastic. And the tobacco wasn't even growing at this point. It was not the season to grow tobacco. And I still got more out of this farm tour probably than I ever got before.
So, Coop, if you can, just tell us about some of the highlights and,
yeah.
and your
I
take on
mean,
it.
Yeah. So yeah, sure. So for starters, Hector doesn't speak a lot of English, right? But he did have a tour guide, one of his lieutenants, I'll say, or whatever. That was very he was very good. Okay, he spoke very good English. He had a lot of passion. And as we were and he took us through everything from the seed right to, even though they couldn't show us the tobacco growing, it was the seed right to when they shipped the tobacco out. And he was just talking a lot of things about, when he was getting into fermentation, he was able to attribute to showing you how you get different sweetness levels in there. In general, they talked a lot about, you know, the primings and the medio tiempo that they grow, and why it's been more scarce in certain years than others, again, it's because of the yield of the soil there. Um, they talked about, and I've seen a lot of the curing stuff before, but I think it was the way it was presented that I thought it was presented with a lot of passion, and it was presented at a level I think that everyone could understand, from a beginner to an advanced person. I definitely came out of that farm tour saying, for anyone who thought the Cubans are behind in terms of agriculture in the tobacco industry, they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. Um, this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah. What about the? I mean, did you get a glimpse at like the curing barns and the fermentation rooms and all that? I mean, how does that compare um, to what you've seen perhaps in Nicaragua and Esteli and et cetera?
Um, so a lot of that's all done kind of at the farm, as opposed to in Nicaragua. I saw a lot of that stuff, particularly the bales, go to pre-production type places, but it seemed like more of that was done right at the farm.
Hmm.
But I don't want to say it was a tobacco warehouse either, so that's kind of a unfair thing. Um, it was so I mean it was very similar to what I saw in the barn. What I'll say is the barns have a very distinct look in Pinar del Rio. I wish I could better put my finger on it, but they have a certain design to it, and from the exterior and the outside, it seems like they're more aesthetically pleasing too from the outside, as well. Um, but in terms of what they again what they did in there as far as the process goes, um, I can't this it's hard to compare and contrast with them, but overall, like I said, they were very, very cognizant of the technology, and just understanding agricultural chemistry and things like that. They're very cognizant of that, and that was a big part of what they discussed as we went through the tour.
I see.
Yeah,
Uh,
which I
so
hadn't gotten that from Nicaragua. I never got that perspective from Nicaragua.
yeah, because I remember going to AJ's farms and earlier this May,
Yeah,
and I think he's more of a pioneer of more eco-friendly. He'll do like drip systems that within the remaining water it'll be recycled as compared to just a lot of farms that I saw out there. People are literally pulling huge freaking hoses and watering manually.
yeah,
So so help us. So Seth Seth just
died.
messaged. He said that his AT&T internet is down. So
Well, we know what the problem was. Yeah.
yeah. Well, anyways, moving on. So tell us about just in general, like take us through within each day that you were there. I like to get a sense of the culture, the food you ate, and certainly which cigars you smoked. My understanding is you smoked a lot of more customs than like the regular production and the limited editions out there. So what is that like? Like for instance, what are the LCDHs like there? Is it like a B&M that we have here, or just kind of give us a glimpse of what each day looks like.
Yeah,
So
I'll take it through each day, and we'll hit on the La Casa de Habano points. Um,
okay,
so when you kind of get down there, um, we got down there about 2 in the afternoon on Sunday. Um, in my little how to go to Cuba piece, I'm gonna tell everyone, when you go into Cuba and when you're coming back from Cuba, account for particularly when you come back, account for the delays, because the airport in Cuba is not the fastest. So getting your luggage even was probably the longest I ever, and I had to check a bag in because I had a lighter.
Uh-huh.
It was probably the longest experience I ever had.
How long did you wait?
Probably about 90 minutes.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So really, what I'll tell everyone, I told everyone on the trip too, is make sure you take some cigars down there, and I'll talk about that reason why in a second. So really, the first day was that Sunday. We got settled into the villas. What you have to do when you get into the villas is you have to. First thing they asked for was my passport and visa. And you actually have to register with the lodge, and that's something that the lodging proprietors are required to do with the Cuban government. They're required to basically tell who's staying there. It's kind of like a little bit of a Big Brother thing. Wasn't a long process, but it was something we had to go through before we did anything else. The first night was we went to a place called El Alibe,
Okay.
which is a very, very famous chicken place.
Huh.
Chicken is their specialty there.
Okay.
So we went there the first night, and that was probably one of the better meals that we had. And so that we did that. There was, I walked in there. The funny thing is, the first thing I see is a picture of Castro, right? Because Castro's 90th birthday was the day before.
Oh, okay.
And they were basically wishing him a happy birthday on the poster, being it was a state-owned restaurant.